Hello there girls and boys. Today I'm gonna show you a completely different digital audio workstation. Yes, I'm not gonna be using Logic today. What? Hello there girls and boys, welcome back to this channel. In this video, as I said before, I'm gonna show you a different digital audio workstation. The name? Mixbus. Yes girls and boys, this digital audio workstation is completely different from the rest of the competition because it's mimicking the sound and the workflow of a mixing desk. Yes, it comes with built-in plugins of some sort, because each channel has a completely independent EQ section and compressor. If this is your first time in the channel, I welcome you, because in here I show you every single thing I do in order to create, write, produce, and of course perform my music live, because I know that making a living as a musician is not a dream, it's a possibility, and if I can do it, you can do it. With that being said, let's get into it. Okay girls and boys, the way to go is gonna be this. First I'm gonna show you a complete mix that I mixed only using the built-in plugins from this digital audio workstation, and then I'm gonna explain to you how it works. So with that being said, let's do it! So here we are girls and boys, right in front of us we got the interface of Mixbus. For those of you who are familiar with Pro Tools, you're gonna feel right back at home, because it's borrowing many of the design decisions that makes Pro Tools what it is. Now, what's the main and most important part of this software? Well, Mixbus is recreating and trying to mimic the workflow, but also the sound from a mixing desk. To be specific, a Harrison mixing desk. So that means that it already comes with a built-in sound that it's part of the whole mixing experience. What does that mean? Well, imagine that by just inserting your tracks into the software, into the digital audio workstation, you are already getting some form of plug-in processed sound. Imagine that you're already applying a sort of distortion to all of the different single tracks, which is quite nice. So let me give you more information about it. So this is your regular stuff. This is your regular interface that you will find in an editor. But this is the main and most important part of the software. If you go over here, you're gonna find this. Bam! The mixer section. This section is very important, girls and boys, because this is what makes Mixbus such a different experience from the rest of the digital audio workstations out there. Here, you got two different main things. We got here the track section, which corresponds to all of the different individual instruments or tracks that we're working on, that comprises our mix. And on the other side, we got the master bus section, which is gonna be divided by the stereo buses here and the master bus over here. You're gonna find something quite interesting. Each channel already looks like a plug-in, and that's a great question, and this is important, girls and boys, because this is what makes Mixbus such a great experience. Here we got a built-in equalizer in each individual channel strip. Let me show it to you in a bigger... Yeah, this is it. You got already an EQ inserted in every single channel. Isn't it that great? It is, girls and boys, because the EQ actually is quite powerful. It's quite minimalistic on its approach, because you only got 3 bands. You got a lower section, a high-end section, and a mid section. And you got a shelving, a picking selector, and a shelving once again, corresponding to low, mid, and highs. And also you got a powerful and beautifully sounding low cut, which you know that I'm a huge fan of. Then you got this section over here. That's the synths. That's how you're going to control and select which of the different master buses you're going to use to assign each of the different individual tracks of your mix. Mixbus comes with 8 different stereo buses. And you might be wondering what's the whole point and what's the fuss about those buses. This is what makes this thing so interesting, girls and boys, because each of those master buses have a sound of its own. And by assigning your instruments to those channels, you're already adding a second layer of characteristics and harmonic distortion that is going to make your sound much more richer, and also it's going to give that analog vibe that it's quite important in this digital age. Now, this is how the signal flows, girls and boys. We're going to start our input by following the following. It's quite simple, girls and boys. We got the input section, then we got this section over here, which is where the inserts are going to happen. That's where we're going to put our plugins. But then we got the EQ section that I already showed you. Then the way to insert and send and select which of the different mix buses are going to be used to control those instruments. And then we got this. Each channel also comes with a compressor built in, and it has its own visual representation and metering system for each individual channel and each individual compressor. Isn't that cool? It is, girls and boys. And each compressor has 3 different settings. You can use it as a leveler, as a compressor, or as a limiter. And when you go to the other side, to the master buses, you're going to have the same experience. You're going to have an equalizer, which is quite different from the one from the different individual channels, because in here you only control a set frequency, which is 300 Hz on the low end. Then you get a mid knob that is controlling another set of frequencies, and you had a high knob as well. And following the same pattern, you're also gonna have a different knob. This is interesting, girls and boys, because in here you can decide if you want to use this channel, the stereo bus, as a mono channel or as an stereo channel. Now it's time to hear some sound examples. Here we go, girls and boys. The mix that you already heard was just mixed by using the built-in sounds. The only instrument or the only plugin that I used that was outside of what comes built in with Mixbus was the reverb, but the rest was only using the equalizers and the compressors. It's that good, girls and boys. Yes, I know. So, here we go, girls and boys. The interesting part about the different stereo buses is that it also comes with a beautifully sounding distortion element or saturation knob, which is quite great. And you can decide and select a different amount of distortion and saturation for each individual mix bus. And the same could be said about the master bus, which also comes with an individual set of EQs, saturation knob, but also a compressor. And also compressors are going to be found on the different stereo buses as well, which is quite cool. And they all follow the same principle, which is using it as a leveler, as a compressor, or as a limiter. And that's super, super cool, girls and boys. From there, let me show you how it sounds like. The workflow for this particular mix was the following. I divided the different instruments in groups. For example, I got my guitars. Over here, you can see the group label. Then the drums, synthesizers, and I left the bass and the lead guitar on its own because those sounds were comprised by one channel, and that was it. Okay, girls and boys? So here's how it sounded like. From the top, I'm gonna solo the sound of the kick and bass, and then the rest of the drums. As you are already hearing, we are getting a really fat sounding and punchy sound. How did that happen? It's because I decided to use a mix bus just to control the kick and the bass. And by doing that, I can control my compression over those elements. And by doing that, I assigned in order to do that, I assigned the kick drum and the bass guitar to be sent to this guy over here, this mix bus over here. By doing that, I applied a generous amount of compression to both the kick and the bass to glue them together. That way we got a richer and much more punchier sounding kick and bass. And our low end, in our overall sound, it's much more controlled and in your face, which is great. Then, what I did with the guitars was this. I liked the sound of the guitars as it was, but since I wanted to have more control over it, I sent them, all of them, to a special track, a special Mixbus. Let me show it to you. Yes, girls and boys, I even sent my lead guitar to that particular Mixbus. Why? Because I wanted to compress a tiny bit the overall difference between the backing tracks and the lead guitar. And by doing that, I glue them together as well. And the final step was sending my bass to its own Mixbus, which was the one for the kick as well, and then I sent my synthesizers to a separate Mixbus. Here it is. And the final step was just assigning a super simple final Mixbus on which I inserted my reverb. And that reverb was this guy over here, girls and boys. My beloved little plate by Sound Toys. And that was it, girls and boys. It's as simple as that. If you see me mixing this song using Mixbus, you should go straight to our live stream section, because tonight I'm gonna be showing you how to do it right in front of you. And if you are from the future, you should go to one of the different corners of the screen and you will find a link taking you straight to the mixing section. And the final step was this. I applied a gentle amount of EQ to our master fader, just adding a little bit of bottom end, removing certain frequencies from the mid-range, and then adding a gentle amount of high-end energy. But at the same time, I applied a really generous amount of overdrive or saturation to add a little bit more bite to the sound, and also to compress even more the low end and give it a little bit more of a punchy sound, and a really gentle amount of compression. And that was it, girls and boys. Everything done just using the built-in plugins or effects that comes built-in with Harrison Mixbus. It's that good, girls and boys. Outstanding, isn't it, girls and boys? I've been using this software for quite a while, and to be honest, there are certain things that I don't like. For example, it's a little bit rough around the edges. The interface, as you saw, is not as pristine or as advanced as Logic, for example. Also, it's kind of difficult to get some of the basic things down because the workflow is not as intuitive as you would expect. But all in all, it's a great package. It's quite fairly priced, and even though I was using the first offering that they have, because they have two different prices, they have two different versions of the software. You got the regular one, which is the one that I was using as an example, and they also have the more advanced one, which has a little bit more bells and whistles. But as you just saw, even using the simplest version that they got to offer, you can get amazing results. This is proof, girls and boys, that if you know what you're doing, you can get amazing results without buying or without the need of getting super expensive plugins. If you like this kind of content, the best way to support this channel is by listening to our music on Apple Music or Spotify. Also, following us on Instagram would be great, because that's where most of the action happens, and that's the best way for you to get in touch with us. As every single time that I meet you, girls and boys, I gotta remind you something. Never, ever, ever let anybody tell you what to dream about. And remember that I will see you when I see you.